What's up, guys? So let's continue building this image gallery we have. And now I'm going to just move our image fetching logic into a Saga. So currently, we are maintaining the list of images in the component state. So let's move this into our Saga. And to get started, I'll just remove the images in the state of my image gallery from here. And let's take the images from the props instead of the state. And I'm already passing in the images from the state, map state to props function. So I will have access to these images here. So if I hit save now, the images, so now none of the images will be rendered, because if I look into my Redux state now, my images is an empty array. So that's why it's not getting rendered here. So cool, no problem. We'll move this logic into a Saga. And in order to fetch the images, we will be using the Unsplash API. And specifically, we are using the get/photos endpoint. And it allows us some options like some params like page, per page, and order by. So we'll be making use of the page parameter so that whenever we hit load images button, it always loads the next set of images. So we want to initiate our API with page number 1 and keep incrementing it as in when we are successfully fetching the images. So in order to get started, let's actually introduce one more state variable into a Redux store called the next page. So let's go into my reducers, and I'm going to create a new reducer here, and let me call it page reducer.js. Yeah, and here I'm just going to paste in my page reducer here. So yeah, I'm importing my images actions, images constants, and we are initiating the state with a value of 1. And whenever a reducer comes across our images.load success, that means that this batch of images has loaded successfully. So we can safely increment the page count. Otherwise, we'll just return the current page number. So I'll give this a save, and in my combined reducers, I'll include it here also. So I'll say page reducer, and I'll call this state variable as next page. And here I'm going to pass in the page reducer. So now if I check into my Redux state, yeah, I'm able to get the next page here. Cool. So now that our page is in place, we can move forward with our Saga logic now. And I'll just create an images Saga now so that we just separate out the logic a bit. So let's say it's called images saga.js, and here we will just in our root Saga we'll just export our images Saga for now. So I'm just going to import my images Saga from /images Saga, and I'm going to export default images Saga here. So yeah, now we are going to create this Saga. And here, let's say we have a generator function here, and let me just start my generator function, and yeah, function, and it's called watch images load. So here we want to look for any images load action dispatch, and then we want to handle it accordingly. So handle images load. So here we are using the take every effect from Redux Saga. So I'm going to import this here. Import take every from Redux Saga. So now we'll be able to capture all the images load action from here. And now we have to create this handle images load saga. So this will be our worker saga, and I'm going to create this handle images load, and here we are going to load the images. Cool. So in order to load the images for a batch of page, we will be using this API get slash photos in unsplash, and we will need the page param. So first let's get our page from the state here. So there are two ways to get our page number. So the first way is gain the access of the page state variable in our component and pass it when we are dispatching the call to load images. So this method would work really well, like if we have paginations, that is we have different pages being rendered on the screen and we want to load a particular page. But here, just to keep things simple and just to cover more ground, we'll be using an effect from Redux Saga, which is called select. So select effect will let us take a slice out of the state tree, and here we want to access the page number in our Redux in our Saga handler here. So let's say I call this age, and here I'm going to yield a select of get page. So this effect requires us to pass in a function, and we can do that by just creating a function here, const get page. So this function should take in the state, the Redux state, and it should return me the next page from the state. Cool. So whenever this saga runs now, we'll be able to get our the page number here. So let's log this into the console and see what we're getting. So console.log page, and I'll give this a save. And now I'm going to just also save this one. And before I do that, I'll just export my images load saga, and this will then be picked from the sagas.js. Cool. So Redux Saga does not contain an export named select. Okay, yeah. So this one should be actually from effects. Yeah, cool. So if I go into my image grid component now, so we can see like images are not getting loaded right now, and we have this load images anchor link. So if I click on this, so we can see like our saga is getting invoked and we are getting the page number here. So we're getting the same page number each time. So that's not a problem, because in our pages reducer, we are actually listening for our images.load success event. So whenever this action will be fired, our page number should get incremented automatically. And now we can go forward with using our API to fetch the images. So I'll go into my images saga here. I'll just remove this console log for now. And now we want to fetch the images so that we can dispatch them to the Redux store. So let's say in order to fetch the images here, we'll have to do some API call. So for that, in order to do function calls, there's another effect from Redux Saga called call, and its format is that we use a yield here and call the call effect. It accepts the function that has to be called. So we'll call a function as fetch images, which we are going to create, and we'll pass in the page param here so that it can load those set of images here. So after we get access to our images here, we'll then dispatch them to the store. So let's go into creating this function here. So for that, I'm just going to go ahead here and let's create a folder called API. and I'm going to create a file here called index.js. Yep, and here we are going to create our fetch images API. So let's say we create const fetch images, and this is where we want to get the images and return them to the Saga. And we will also do a named export of fetch images here. Cool. So now that this thing is set up, and here in order to fetch the images from Unsplash, you'll also need the client ID. So here I'm just going to paste in my client ID, but you can get it on your own from your Unsplash account. So I'll just, on the top of my file, I'll just paste in my client ID. So this has to be appended to the end of the URL, which is api.unsplash.com/photos, and it should have a URL param called client ID. So you can get this from your developer account. And one thing here is that whenever our handle images load Saga comes across this yield call statement, it is going to suspend the Saga until and unless this call has succeeded. So in order to do that, our fetch images should return a promise, so that the Saga can suspend itself until and unless this promise has completed. So it will be in a suspended state till either the promise has succeeded or it has been rejected. Cool. So we'll make our fetch images an async function, and it's going to take in the page. Yeah, and here we want to wait for the response. So let's say we do const response, and we want to await for it. So await fetch, and here I'm just going to paste in the URL that we are going to fetch. Cool. So nothing fancy. We are taking in the URL from here, which is unsplash.com/photos, adding in the key here, and just adding in this param for per page. So we want to actually limit the page, limit the number of images loaded per page, so that we can see them easily. And I'm just appending in the page is equal to param here, so that it just loads the image for that set of page. Cool. So this will give us back an promise, and we can get the data back by awaiting for the response.json. Cool. So this should give us back a response, and we want to check the status of the response that we got earlier. So response.status. So if it's anything greater than 400, that means that we might have missed out something, or there was an error fetching the images. So we'll just throw some error here. So throw new error, and so Unsplash just sends the error in a key called errors. So we can just pick that from data or data variable. And if it's anything other than, if anything less than a 400 status, it means the images were fetched successfully. So we can return the data here. Cool. So this wraps up our fetch images API. Yeah. So we are using an async function here just to keep things neat and clean. And one thing you might have noticed here is this throw statement. So if an error is thrown while our Saga is in progress, it might break the code. So in order to handle that, we can just put this entire thing inside a try catch block. So I'll say try catch, and I'm just going to move the statements into the try block, and whenever our error is thrown, it would be captured by the catch block. So let's say it catches the error as error, and then we want to dispatch the error action here. So yeah, now that our fetch images API has also been created, I can go ahead and import that as well. So import fetch images from // API. Cool. So I got them here, and when we get the images here from the API, we can use the put effect from Redux Saga to dispatch an action here. So we can do yield put, and we want to dispatch an action here. So we already have our actions over here. So we want to use the set images as well as the set error actions depending on if our API call was succeeded. So I'll just import them from the actions. So it's called set images and set error. So yeah, set images comma set error from actions. And now I can just dispatch an action of set images here, pass in the images. Cool. And in case of an error, I can just dispatch an set error action, and we will convert the error object to a string using the toString method on that. Yeah, I just remove this here, give that a save, and now our Saga is in place. So when I click on the load images button, it just loaded the images here. Very cool, right? So we can see the sequence of actions here. Our image gallery was first initiated, then an images load action was dispatched when we click on the button, and after the images was successfully fetched, it dispatched a set images action. And we can also see that the next page also incremented itself, because that's how we wrote it in the pages reducer. So that's a really neat. And let's also see like if we can handle the errors here. So we're already setting in the errors into this state tree. So in our images gallery here, so I'll just close this Saga, close the actions, close the API, and in our image gallery we can just pick the error from the state here. So let's say I have the error here, and I'm just going to paste in some markup here for the styles that I wrote recently. And yeah, so after this section here, I'm just going to paste it in. Cool. So whenever our error has some value other than some truly value, it would render the error as a stringified block with a error class name, which we already have in the style sheet. So I'll just give this a save. And now we also don't need a component did mount here, because we're getting these images directly from the Redux store. So you can get rid of this fetch call here, and let's just load the images once when our component gets mounted. So this props load images, and give that a save. Cool. So we're getting the images, and this is on the first load. If I click on this button, it loads the images, the next batch of images. So I'm just going to make this button a bit better. So I already have my button component, and we're just going to create a folder here for a button component. Let's call it button, and over here I'll just have a button.js for my component, and an index.js to export it as a default, and a style sheet, styles.css. So let me just paste in the styles. Cool. So these are really neat styles, and I'm just going to paste in my button component also into my button.js. And here we just our button component has some props. So it has a children prop and a loading prop. So this loading prop we just use to set in some loading state or render the children, depending on what's the state of the button. And let's just import this in index.js. So I'll import button from /button and do it as a default export default button here. Cool. And in my image grid, now I'm going to import this. Also, we don't need this key, so let's say we get import button from /button. Cool, got it, guys. And now I'm just going to render this button. So just going to copy in the markup here, and yeah, so this is a button. So it has an on-click event, and whenever the component is not in loading state, we're just going to load the images. So in order to get this loading state, we can just destructure it from the props here. So it's loading, we're already passing that from our map state to props, and we can add a load images action call here. Cool. So now I can get rid of our old button here and give that a save. Cool. So now we got this really cool button here, and let's see what happens if I click on this. So it seems like it's not responding to the on-click event. So that's because yeah, I haven't destructured the load images from the props here. So I can do that, load images. Now it will get the function correctly, and if I hit that, cool, so it's now loading the images correctly. Also, let's look into how the errors get caught if they are thrown. So we can manually simulate an error here by just going into our API, which we just created, the fetch images API, and let's say we deliberately throw some error here. And in order to do that, I think again, if I just play around with the page param here, it should throw an error. But let's say give that a save. Okay, it doesn't throw an error. But if I change the page number to something, let's say if I change the page to 0, will it throw an error? It doesn't. Okay, -1. Oh, cool, so it doesn't throw an error. But if I change the page to, let's say, some string, cool, so now we have gotten an error here. So our image grid is correctly displaying this error, and let's look into the sequence of actions that were dispatched. So the Saga was initially initialized, images load action was dispatched, and if we look into our Saga, our images Saga, yeah, so when the fetch images API call was failed, the error was caught in this catch block, and we just dispatched it into the Redux store using the put effect. So we can see like Sagas really make asynchronous code way simpler, and that's like one of the things I really like about Sagas. So I'll just change this back to what it was, give that a save. Cool. So now we've gotten our gallery working really good, and next we can just go forward adding the image stats into the gallery. Cool.